Good day and welcome to the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, the power and support of an online community during the bone marrow transplant journey. Today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Ms. Jennifer Gillette. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. Yes, I am the staff social worker at the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, and I'd like to welcome you all to Lunch and Learn with the Link. This month's speakers will discuss the power and support of an online community during the bone marrow transplant journey. It's our goal that today's program will inspire and equip you with a new skill or idea as you learn how to go through this journey. A special thank you to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and our Link partners for making this program possible today. Just a basic little outline for you so you know how we're going to run today. I'm just going to tell you a few minutes about the Link and what we have to offer, and then we are going to have our first speaker, Shona Lovie, and then we have a survivor that is very active in the community that will be joining us today, Jack Aiello, and then we're going to open up the call for about half the hour for questions. And then at the end, we're just going to wrap up, tell you a little bit about next month's program, and that'll be a few minutes. For those who may not be familiar with the Link, our mission is dedicated to helping individuals and their families from diagnosis through survivorship. We reinforce, complement medical care by providing resources, support, and education. Some of the resources we provide to help families navigate their transplant journey are our Chronic Graft versus Host series, our Caregiver webinar series. We have a peer support mentor program for patients, caregivers, and donors, our Second Birthdays Recognition program, and we have several great books and referrals, and of course we provide emotional support from a licensed social worker. We provide a variety of other educational and support opportunities such as the call you are on today. So please feel free to reach out to us if you are interested in any of our services. Before we begin today's program, I would like to review just a couple little housekeeping items to maximize the experience for all on the call today. First of all, just due to a limited amount of time, if we're spending a lot of time on one question, I might need to cut it just a little bit short just to make sure we can get other questions in. So that is just to make sure we hear from everyone. Please also refrain from any judgmental statements towards fellow participants, respecting that everyone handles this in their own unique way. And please know that the information provided in this program is meant to stimulate conversation with your provider, not to replace any individualized medical plan. So now on to the educational part of our program. Our first speaker today, we are so thankful to have Shona Lovie from LLS joining us. She is the online community engagement manager. In addition to managing the patient community, she assists the patient access department with other forms of digital engagement, such as hosting podcasts, publishing blogs, and managing an online expressive writing program. Prior to LLS, Shona worked in lymphoma research at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and worked as a content specialist for a web design agency. She has a master's in public health from the University of Georgia. In her spare time, she's an avid runner, hiker, climber, and animal lover. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shona.
Well, thank you very much for having me. So, as they said, I am the manager of the online community at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. So this is an 11,000-member community, and we've been in existence for about 3 years. So I just wanted to share what exactly is an online community and why it's beneficial to be a part of one. So an online community can really just be defined as a group of people who come together online for a specific purpose. So there's two different types. You have your public social networks, which is, your Facebook, LinkedIn, Quora, Instagram. We're probably all familiar with those. And the second type is a branded community or a private community. So this relies on a brand or other owned property. So the LLS community falls under the umbrella of a branded community. So these are different. They require a separate login. They're a safe place to share stories, provide support, etc. And they're totally private and secure. So online patient communities are a bit unique in that sphere as well. Their purpose is to connect individuals going through similar life events for the purpose of support and connection. So one interesting feature of an online patient community is that it can serve as a source of education. So communities that integrate education can include articles, videos, blogs, and other educational resources. And oftentimes, nonprofits such as LLS have trained staff available on the community to answer questions and connect users to resources. So us, for example, we have staff online every weekday to screen for posts and comments by users in need of help. So this is kind of how we differ from Facebook groups. You know, like other nonprofits, we provide so much education on our website and in person that it's sometimes hard to know where to begin. So our staff on the community will often point users in the right direction so they can access this wealth of educational materials. So it kind of goes beyond just being a support group. This is a true community of patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals who are all coming together to provide support to those who need it. So I mentioned caregivers as being a part of the community, and I just wanted to point out that these communities aren't just for patients. Caregivers can also benefit from joining a community. So as you know, caregivers are often on the front line of support for their loved one, and they can use online patient communities to connect with others like them and learn more about the logistical questions that they may have, such as financial questions, living arrangements, legal concerns, and other advocacy concerns. So I encourage caregivers to join specialized caregiver groups that might exist within these online communities. For example, we have over 2,000 caregivers on our site. So this can provide a wealth of support to caregivers who are looking for people to connect with. And they can also turn to these communities to prevent emotional burnout. And this kind of support often comes from the patients themselves. So I have written down a couple of quotes from patients about their caregivers. A caregiver is the best thing that a patient can have, essential to recovery. Someone who is strong when I am not and listens even when it is not important. My friend, my life, he holds me up when I am not able to stand alone. So I imagine that as a caregiver, it must be extremely validating to see these beautiful words written by patients in support of their caregivers. But perhaps the most important feature of an online community is that it's a place for interaction. You know, face-to-face groups and in-person support groups can be extremely beneficial, but they're only effective when you can access them. So if they're not being held in your particular area, or if they're not convenient to your schedule, or if you don't have the transportation to attend these meetings, you won't be able to reap the benefits. So one incredible thing about online patient communities is they actually break across these geographic barriers and let those living with the disease connect with others around the world. Our community has members in 6 out of the 7 continents, not just throughout the United States, but 6 out of the 7 continents. So you can really connect with other people going through what you're going through worldwide. So this can be particularly beneficial for those with rare diseases if you've never met anyone who has the same disease as you, or if you live in a rural area and it's difficult for you to access face-to-face connection. I do want to talk about smartphones because smartphones have completely revolutionized the way we interact online. They've made communities and online communities become more and more relevant because they're so accessible. You probably have, if you own a smartphone, you have a computer in your pocket at all times. So you can access these communities at all times. Actually, according to the Pew Research Center, 77% of Americans own a smartphone. And just speaking from my experience, in our community, over half of our traffic comes from a mobile device or a tablet. So the fact that smartphones and tablets and other mobile devices are becoming so prevalent is increasing the access to online communities. However, according to the FCC, 6% of Americans still lack access to the Internet, and that translates to 19 million people. So it really drives home the point that Internet access is becoming a basic need because it's not only important for health literacy, but also for this social connection. This increased access to information is so revolutionary. We're connected to each other now in ways previously we would have thought completely unfathomable. So I wanted to share a quote from a user. She says that our community has been such a great place for her. It is inspiring, comforting, and informational. I've made such a great friend on the West Coast. I don't know what I would do without her. So being able to connect with people in different geographical regions can be so fulfilling and rewarding for these patients. Another aspect of coming together for interaction is that you can connect with other patients and get real answers. So things like, what does a bone marrow biopsy really feel like? What does a bone marrow transplant what am I actually going to go through when I experience a bone marrow transplant? What can I expect? How will I feel? And most importantly, what helped you get through it? So, healthcare professionals can offer objective responses to these questions, but only other patients who have been through the same thing can really tell you the nitty-gritty of what to expect. So things like, do you feel depressed? What is chemo brain really like? What tips and tricks helped you survive this journey that I'm about to embark upon myself? So I've seen people share tips on how to make a bone marrow biopsy less painful, what to ask for, who to see, where to go that can actually make that process easier, how to prevent the worst of mucositis when you're undergoing your conditioning regimen for bone marrow transplant. These are real tips that real people can share with you that help them. So this can have real and tangible results for your care. So I wanted to share another quote from a user. He said, encouraging comments from others regarding stem cell transplant outcomes helped me make the decision to proceed with one. So this actually had a real and tangible result for his care. So one thing I want to talk about that I find incredibly interesting, this is a phenomenon that I've seen so many times, is online communities allow you to shed the mask that you normally have. It breaks down this mental barrier to asking for help when you might normally avoid doing so. Because even if we have access to various forms of assistance, we're often terrible at doing so. And there could be many reasons why. So let's look at financial toxicity as an example. There can be a stigma behind struggling financially or a sense of shame, perhaps. So when you connect with other users who are experiencing financial toxicity, it drives home the point that you are not alone. You have done nothing wrong. You haven't failed because you're suffering financial consequences. And then once you realize that this is not your fault, this might free your mind up enough to seek assistance. And there is so much assistance out there. You just have to know to ask for it. So let's look perhaps at pain as well. If we don't know that what we're feeling is normal, we might be hesitant to tell our doctor. We might blame ourselves or think that the pain won't be taken seriously. So being kind of anonymous online can help you break down that mental barrier to asking for help. And if you ask for help in a patient community, as I said before, we have staff online that are there to help you. Chances are you will encounter someone that is able to assist you, and you don't even have to shed that mask. You can maintain your alias online, receive help, and no one has to know you asked. So again, I want to share a quote. This person wrote, "It's about knowing you're not alone. There are others feeling the same as you. I feel that sometimes people think I'm making up everything about how much pain I have. I never tell anyone how much pain I really have or how sad I am at times. This platform lets us be ourselves without judgment." So by hearing others' experiences and getting encouragement from them, you can become better equipped to be your own advocate, which is really important. I do want to talk a little bit about outcomes and improved quality of life, because being part of these online communities can actually affect outcomes. So the first type of outcome I want to talk about is population-level outcomes. So online patient communities offer the opportunity to participate in real-world research and provide data needed to understand unmet needs, design improved treatments and tools, and then ultimately improve lives. So one way you can do this is by participating if your community has a polling capability. So ours has a polling capability. We ask questions twice a week, and patients can answer, and we collect both quantitative and qualitative data. And that information, we then compile it, analyze it, and use it to inform our programs and patient services. We've even given it to our advocacy department who wrote up in a report about the cost of cancer care, which they then used to advocate for better legislation. So participating in these communities can actually help improve real-world population-level outcomes, but also individual-level outcomes as well. You know, as I keep saying, you can interact with trained staff that can connect you to resources and answer questions regarding treatment and, you know, perhaps refer you to an in-person support group or a counselor, you know, things like that. I wanted to share two examples. The first example is a patient was in the United States. These are real things that happened on our community. This patient was in the United States kind of as a refugee. So she was away from her home country and away from her home doctor. She required a monthly oral medication, and she was unable to access it because she wasn't in her home country. She reached out to us on community, and we were able to connect her with another foundation that provided her with an emergency supply of her medication, which helped bridge the gap while she was waiting to establish care in the U.S. And as you know, these oral medications require strict adherence, so we were actually able to improve her outcomes. Another example, there was a patient, she was dealing with crippling anxiety following treatment, and she was not really connecting well with her therapist because the therapist didn't have much experience in dealing with cancer patients. So she reached out to us on community, let us know how desperate she was, and we were actually able to connect her locally with a therapist, with a specialized oncology therapist. And then she came back and reported later that her anxiety was under control, and this was the first time by reaching out to us that she really felt like she was heard. So, of course, not all outcomes are going to be as significant as these, but hearing others' experiences can certainly inform decision-making that can lead to improved outcomes. So finally, I just wanted to share some of my personal tips and tricks, I guess my do's and don'ts, as you know, what you should do to get the most out of your online community experience. So the first, I'll start with the do's. The first do is read the guidelines. Each community is different. Make sure you've read the guidelines and the terms of services specific to your community, just so that you're aware of the rules of posting. You don't want to write this amazing, well-crafted, well-thought-out reply to somebody's question only to have it taken down because you are unaware of a rule that existed. So you don't want to be blindsided by things like that. Also, you can control your privacy settings. So you can choose how much information is visible to other members. If you are the type of person that thinks the more I share, the better connection I will have, by all means, share as much as you want. If you're the type of person who's a little bit more private and a little bit more, shy with how much you share, you can certainly control how much others see. I would suggest that if you are the type of person that wants to be more private, choose a username that doesn't reveal your true identity. Again, some people just use their first and last name because they feel, I'm out there, I'm in the world, I want everyone to know who I am. Other people are much more protective of their identity. You know, I have an unusual name, so my online alias is my cat's name. So you can definitely control how much of yourself other people can know. Another thing that you can do is you can control your email settings. So this is so important. We do so much communication by email, and by we, I mean our online community. So you get email, if you were to join our community, you would get email notifications for everything. Like I said, we do our question of the day. We also do weekly digests. Those are emails. You get an email every time somebody replies to your comment. You get an email every time you receive a private message. So people do write into me and say, please unsubscribe me from all emails. The thing is, you can control how many emails you get. If you're only interested in that one weekly email summarizing everything you've missed, then you can set your email settings to only receive that email. If you don't care about any of that and you just want to know when someone replies to your comment, you can set your email settings to reflect that. So definitely adjust your email settings accordingly, and this will make your experience much more manageable. Another thing I would recommend is join the groups that interest you. So we have a bone marrow transplantation group where all conversations in that group pertain to bone marrow transplantation. We have groups for every diagnosis of interest, groups that correspond to lifestyle preferences like nutrition and fitness. And I know many, many other communities out there have the same type of setup. So definitely join the groups that correspond to your interests. And then you can even bookmark that on your taskbar. If you only really are concerned with what's going on in the bone marrow transplantation group, go ahead and bookmark that on your taskbar, and then with one click, you can get into that one particular group with all the conversations that are interesting to you. Another thing that I would definitely recommend is making use of all the features on the community. So private messaging is a big one. If you've made a friend that you really connect with and you want to update them on what's going on with your treatment journey or just on your life, and you don't think that everyone on the community needs to see this, then use that private message feature. It's secure, it's safe, and only the people that you want to see that information will see it. Again, with the polling capabilities, definitely participate in that. That data is so valuable to the people behind the scenes that are going to be compiling it and using it. One thing that's an interesting concept in online communities is called gamification. And this can make your experience really fun if you're part of a community that uses gamification. So things like rewards, points, badges for certain levels of participation can make this experience so much more fun for you, so definitely engage in that. And photos. Photos are so fun. Photos allow people to see that it's you, that it's a person behind the screen name. Again, if you don't want people to see you, definitely don't upload any photos. If you want people to know a little bit more about who you are, upload the photos, make your avatar, your picture, put photos on your story page. You can even include photos in the posts that you make. And this can make the whole experience a little bit more personal. So definitely take advantage of that if you so choose. Another thing that I would suggest is connect with the staff. I know that on our community, our staff are designated by a little blood drop. So when you see that staff member, go ahead and ask them a direct question. Go ahead and make that connection. And along the same lines, give feedback to the admins. We can't change everything about the site, but if there's a bug, if there's a glitch, if there's something that's just not user-friendly and you think that maybe your suggestion could kind of help improve the experience, go ahead and let us know, particularly about bugs and glitches, because we can't be everywhere at once, and things do happen. So definitely reach out to your admins if you have suggestions. And I do want to say, practice safe online practices. When you connect with people online, these connections can be really real. These aren't just your online friends. These are your friends. So naturally, if you live in the same area, you're going to want to meet people for coffee. This might not necessarily apply to you, but if it does, just be safe. Choose a public place. Talk before meeting. Phone or email is best. Bring along a friend, and of course, always trust your gut instincts. If something's wrong, if you feel like something's wrong, it probably is. But these are kind of common sense, tips. And then finally, find what works for you. So not every community is going to be set up in a way that makes sense to you. Some people love Facebook groups, and they only want to engage in Facebook groups because they're on Facebook every day anyways. Comes into their news feed, it's easy, and they're fine with that. There's other people that don't want to touch Facebook with a 10-foot pole, and they prefer these specialized online patient communities that nonprofits such as LLF can provide. They're both fine. There's no one right or wrong way to engage in the online community. If you've tried one out, doesn't quite work for you, go ahead and try another one. You don't know. The culture and the vibe could be completely different depending on what community you're in. So find what works for you. Now, there's some things that you maybe shouldn't do, my don'ts list. First is, don't get political, which I don't even really have to say that because of all, like I said, we have 11,000 members and we've been around for 3 years. I've never seen an online space so devoid of political arguing as I have my own community. People just tend to respect that the space is primarily for support and encouragement, and they really keep the debates out of it, so it becomes this kind of haven and safe space from the overall, climate of political debating and whatnot. On the same token, don't spam or promote, each community is different, and each community will have different guidelines as far as what is appropriate as far as promoting or not promoting. Some might allow you to post your GoFundMe page. Some might not. So know what you can and can't do before you go ahead and post, because, again, you don't want things to be taken down. You want to follow all the rules. And another one, and this is tricky, is don't give medical advice. So this is a fine line, because you are there to share your medical experience and to offer suggestions. But blatant medical advice could be something like, you need to reduce your dose, cut your pills in half, and by the way, don't tell your doctor. That type of thing, not acceptable in an online community. But I find that our patients are so good about this. They're really, really good at determining when, sharing their experience is relevant and useful, and then when a patient needs to see their doctor. So I think, a patient will say, I'm 6 months out of treatment and all of a sudden I'm experiencing night sweats again. Do you think I'm having a relapse? And the patients will say, get off this community and go see your doctor. So, as far as giving medical advice, use your judgment, but, nothing blatant. And the most important thing is a do and a don't. Don't just receive the advice, give back. So if you have a lot of suggestions and experience, it's invaluable for patients who are newly embarking on their journey. If you're 6 years out of treatment, someone else can learn so much from you. So give back. Don't be an active participant both ways. Ask questions and answer questions. So I wanted to end by just sharing a couple more quotes from our users about how they have found the online community to be beneficial. So this person wrote, I am so grateful for all here. Like many of you, I do not use any other form of social media. I stay here to help and to be helped. I'm home again with the only people in the world that can truly empathize with me. And someone else wrote, it has helped me learn what others have experienced, how they overcame or dealt with bumps in the road, and it provides encouragement. It helps me remain positive on the journey. And then this last quote, we all have daily struggles that we don't always share with family and friends, but we can share it with others on this site. Thank you for providing this site for all of us to ask questions, share with others, and to see that we're not alone. So that's about all I have. I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Shona. That was some great tips, and especially if someone's a little unsure of using those communities, I think you gave some great inspiration for their benefit. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Next, yes, that was great. I would now like to introduce you all to our next speaker, Jack Aiello. He was born 69 years ago in San Mateo, California, and raised in Silicon Valley. He obtained undergraduate degrees in computer science and math from UC Santa Cruz and graduate degrees from MIT. From 1976 to 2001, Jack worked in various technical sales and marketing positions at local high-tech companies such as Intel Corporation, Grid Systems, which invented manufactured laptops, and a company which manufactured video processing products. Jack and Nell have been married for 47 years and have 3 wonderful children and 4 fabulous grandchildren. In 1995, Jack was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which started him on a series of numerous treatments, including chemotherapy, 3 stem cell transplants, several rounds of radiation, and 2 clinical trials. Due to treatment side effects, Jack was forced to go on medical disability in 2001 and has been volunteering for various cancer organizations ever since. These include the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, the International Myeloma Foundation, and Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, as well as facilitating the local San Francisco Bay Area Myeloma Support Group. For the past 6 years, Jack has been an active research patient advocate for clinical trial development on the NCI and SWOG Myeloma Steering Committee, as well as a member of the Center for International Blood and Marrow Transplant Research, Consumer Advocacy Council, and he's also a board member of the Patient Empowerment Network, a patient advisor for Myeloma Crowd, and serves on several patient advocacy committees for different pharmaceutical companies. So Jack is a very busy man with lots to share. Thanks for joining us today, Jack.
Well, thanks for that long introduction, Jennifer. If you listened to that carefully, you heard that I was diagnosed with myeloma in 1995. And if I think back 24 years ago, that was still a time where the question of will the Internet even be successful, let alone what resources were provided, those questions were still being asked. And yet even then, what was always important to me is to be an educated patient. So today, there are many ways to get educated so that patients, as Shona mentioned, can do their best to advocate for themselves. Certainly their medical provider is important. If they have access to support groups, that can be awfully important. There are seminars. I was at one sponsored by the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society on transplants just last night. There are webinars, which I will jump onto right after this call. And then the Internet and online social media. One of the things you get out of all of these different forums is the ability to share patient experiences. And even though patient experiences vary, and whatever one patient goes through may be quite different than what you might go through, it still provides information with how to get advice, especially going through transplants. What questions to ask your doctor before you even go through a transplant? What's it like to, how are transplants defined? What is this thing called an autologous versus an allogeneic transplants? How are stem cells going to be harvested? Especially how are your stem cells or your donor stem cells going to be harvested? What's the actual transplant procedure like? What's this thing called graft versus host disease? What's the follow-up involved? There are lots of questions that, again, the better educated you are, the better you can manage those expectations. Social media today really can help answer those questions. Back in the 90s, there was almost nothing, at least in the mid-90s. There was something, however, called ACOR, and ACOR was what was referred to as a listserv, where on a particular disease, you could ask a question on email, and whoever was on that same ACOR disease forum could answer those questions. And that became quite valuable even to, especially for me, that was kind of my forum in the, if you will, social media. Today, ACOR has been replaced by a web-based program called Smart Patients. As Shona mentioned, there are also Facebook groups. There are communities offered by LLS, as she explained so well. I've been on that since the day it opened and always enjoy the question of the day because it gives you immediate feedback as to what the results of their questions were. For myeloma patients, the myeloma crowd has various groups that you can join. I also find it fascinating that Twitter really offers patients good information. It's amazing to me how many doctor experts for a particular disease are on Twitter and will reply to patients and share information in terms of local research. There's something called tweet chats where you can, again, have a forum discussing a particular question. You just have to be able to type quickly. And so in some cases, today's social media can almost get overwhelming. So as Shona suggested, pick and choose your particular interests, whether it's a forum of Facebook or communities or whatever, but just be careful about not getting overwhelmed initially. Rather do what you can to become the best educated patient in order to advocate for yourself as possible. And I'll stop there because I know there might be questions. I'm happy to answer any questions from this patient's perspective and turn it back over to Jennifer.
Well, thank you, Jack. We really appreciate you joining us today. And I also want to say a special thanks to Jack. Those of you that registered probably saw that we were having Cindy speak with us today, but there was a family emergency, and Jack has graciously offered to help us here. So thank you again, Jack. And so now this is the point where we have questions. So, Mitchell, could you share with everyone how to do that if they have a question today?
Absolutely. If you would like to ask a question, please signal by pressing star 1 on your telephone keypad. If you are using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. When it is your turn to ask a question, you will hear a prompt letting you know that your line is open and live. Please be sure to announce your name before asking your question. Again, press star 1 to ask a question. We'll pause just a moment to allow everyone an opportunity to signal for questions. Again, that is star 1 to ask a question. And I'm showing no questions in the queue.
Okay. Well, we'll start with a couple of our own here, and if anyone decides to chime in, we'd love to have your questions here today. But I think I'd like to start this first one for Shona. With all the information you're hearing on the news today and personal information being out on the Internet, how secure are these online communities?
Yeah, that is such a great question because it's definitely something that's on everyone's mind right now. Is my data safe online? And one of the benefits to having these closed communities is that they are very secure. So as I mentioned before, you don't have to use your real name. You don't even have to put your real name in when you're filling out your profile form. We recommend that you do because it's easier for us to contact you, but you can keep it as anonymous as you'd like. And also, our communities are very secure. The platform itself is secure. Anyone who makes a profile has to go through a CAPTCHA, which is an anti-robot software. So there are no bots, no scammers. Even when you send a private message, you have to do a CAPTCHA as well. That prevents you from, spamming the community with multiple messages at once. So these platforms do tend to be very secure. And like I said, you can control the amount of information that you share. You're not using your real name. That's one of the benefits that I think that these closed online communities can really offer patients, which is the opportunity to get support, but control your level of privacy and security.
That is great information to know. Thank you so much. How user-friendly are these groups?
Yeah, so, you think, okay, maybe I didn't grow up with technology. Maybe I grew up in a time before computers. Is this something that is easy to use? And my answer to that is, I can't speak for everybody, but I do know that of the 11,000 patients that we have, I perhaps will need to walk somebody through over the phone once or twice a year. So they are very user-friendly. I was just reading a comment the other day from a woman who's 90, and she's just using the community like everyone else. One of my favorite patients, he's on every day. He's in his 70s, and he uses his phone. I didn't even realize that he doesn't own a computer. His entire participation is purely through his smartphone. So these are, our community is designed to be user-friendly, and I know that a lot of the other ones are designed to be user-friendly as well. So yeah, this isn't something just for young people who have grown up with the internet. This is truly for everybody.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure for people who haven't grown up with the computer, that's a comforting response. How about Jack? How is social media affecting you as a long-term survivor today, Jack?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's affected me mostly because I've gone into research advocacy. And what that means is that I work with organizations from the National Cancer Institute or from the SWOG Clinical Trials Research Organization or another one that you mentioned. And my job is really to offer and provide the patient perspective. So the question then becomes is how do I get that patient perspective? And I have several ways. As you mentioned, I facilitate a large support group, so I hear from patients all the time there. But I also am quite active on Twitter and quite active on a particular applicable Facebook group, as well as some other organizations where patients are there and they're asking questions and they're expressing concerns. And they wonder, why, if I'm in a remission, do I need to be on this maintenance treatment? Or they're expressing concerns about, does everyone get this type of rash side effect from a particular drug I use? And even though I may not be on those drugs, I need to be able to, again, represent that patient perspective in those various clinical trial development groups and the pharma companies who will ask for my perspective as well. I need to be able to represent those accurately and provide as complete a picture as possible. I'm only one single patient, and I'm not even on treatment these days. But I need to be able to organize my thoughts according to all the patient feedback I've gotten in the past. And as I mentioned, social media is one of those ways to get that patient feedback.
Well, it sounds like a very useful tool for what you're doing. Thank you, Jack. Mitchell, do we have anyone on the line at this point?
We currently have one question.
Okay, if we could bring that caller in, please.
Certainly. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Terry. I have very much enjoyed this information. Thank you so much. My question is, where do I start? You keep talking about this online community. Is it a website that I go to? I've been through a year's journey with lymphoma, and I've never been able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I can start, and then perhaps Jack can share some of his ideas as well. So as far as our organization is concerned, you can find the link to our patient community on our homepage. So you can go to LLS.org and then find patient community. We also, if you are interested in our particular web address, it's communityview.lls.org. But, as I've been researching other communities and I look for other communities, oftentimes you'll go, if a nonprofit has its own space for an online community, that will usually be available on its website. So, for example, I was looking at a breast cancer nonprofit, and they had their space for an online community. So if they have it, it should be pretty easy to find on their website itself. So I don't know, Jack, if you want to kind of add to that.
Well, the other thing I might add is that Leukemia and Lymphoma Society has lots of support groups around the country. They may have one near you. If that's the case, go to one and ask them, are they involved with social media? How did they get on as well? And, of course, you can Google lymphoma and a number of different sources will come up that you can start to get involved with. You can go on to Twitter. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. And you can just kind of use what's called a hashtag lymphoma. And you can kind of just read in the background what's happening. You don't have to put out tweets. You can just, if you will, listen to what other patients and medical experts are talking with respect to particular diseases.
And I just want to share another thing. If you are interested in Facebook groups, and a lot of people love them, you can go to Facebook, go hit the groups link, and within the Facebook groups page, you can search. So I just did that real quick on my phone. I searched bone marrow transplant, and all of these bone marrow transplant Facebook groups came up. The first one, bone marrow and stem cell transplantation, patient support, with almost 5,000 members. So there, if you want to look that way, you can do searches through Facebook as well.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions today?
There are no more questions in the queue.
Okay. Well, at this time, I think we're going to wrap this up here then. If anyone does have any questions that they might just not have felt comfortable asking, you can send those to us after the presentation. The recording of this will be on our website within about a week, as well as we will be having the notes from this sent to you in about a week. Today you'll also be receiving a survey, so you can let us know how we can better serve you with these in the future, or if you have any ideas on future presentations you would like to hear about. And then also, just so you know, too, next month we are going to have a presentation on research that's been done on light therapy and having that help with fatigue management. So there will be information about that coming to you as well. But I would like to thank both of our speakers for being with us today. This has certainly been a very informative presentation, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And, of course, thank you to LLS, who is a dear buddy of the LINK, and all of our LINK partners for making this possible. We hope everyone has a great day.